Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we are super happy to have you here, and we just ask that you bring an open mind and heart to your listening experience and to be prepared to explore vantage points that I'm convinced will help shift or solidify your current understanding of the ultimate nature of reality in a way that is extremely empowering. Speaking of exploring powerful perspectives, I would like to gift my book, The Golden Key, Modern Alchemy to Unlock Infinite Abundance to you at goldenkey.gift, where you can get the audio or ebook as my gift to you by using the code POSITIVEHEAD at checkout. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Paul Selig back here with me on the show. Paul is a psychic intuitive, teacher, and an award-winning author of several channeled books, who is back to talk about his latest book, which is the first in his new manifestation trilogy titled Resurrection. Hello there, Paul. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and for those who didn't catch Paul the first go round, it was a little over a year ago, episode 1530. You can go back and dig into the archives. It was a great conversation, and I'm definitely excited about picking up where we left off, so to speak. If you would, and in that episode, being the first time on, I'm sure I had you kind of give a thorough backstory. Maybe you could just, for those who it's the first time hearing you, you could give sort of, brief, and if they want to go deeper, they can go back to that former episode, but just sort of how you ended up on this very unique path that you're on.
I wasn't intended. I was raised sort of an atheist. I wasn't particularly interested in things spiritual. I ended up sort of really hitting a wall when I was 25 years old. I was about a year out of a master's degree at Yale, and I was drinking far too much and, being relatively self-destructive. And I found myself praying, surprisingly doing that, only because the Gideons left some Bible in a hotel room that I was stuck in, and I didn't know where the drugs were in St. Paul, at the Gopher Campus Motor Lodge. So I said this thing for prayer for people in crisis. I didn't know what it meant. I just meant it when I said it. And about 3 days later, I heard a voice, really, is what happened. It was just, I asked myself what I could do for myself that day that was positive. And I call it a voice. Really, it's a thought that interrupts all other thoughts and moves your own consciousness way off to the background, and you can't deny it. And I listened to it, and my life changed, and that was the beginning. And I think I began opening up to the possibility of something, God, whatever you want to call it, in spite of myself, and maybe because I was secretly hungry for it, because it just wasn't part of how I grew up as a New York City kid. We didn't believe in those things. But anyway, I had a little experience a few months after that, or a big experience of energy moving through me. And I don't know what it was. I may have been hyperventilating. People said it sounded like a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. I may never know. But it was an experience of energy, and I started seeing little lights around people after that and becoming clairsentient without even knowing what that was. And I studied a form of energy healing to get a context for this, because somebody said, maybe this will help. And I did, and I found that when I had my hands on people's bodies, I could hear things for them. I was volunteering at a center for people that were living with life-challenging illness. It was, back in the early 90s, it was the height of the AIDS epidemic in New York, and these places were popping up. And I found if I had my hands on somebody and I heard the name Arthur, and I'd say, who's Arthur? They might say, my husband, my lover, my dog, my son, and all this energy would move. And as that kept getting confirmed, I began trusting whatever I was hearing more. And I had a little group that met in my apartment for about 18 years, where I began channeling and working with the energy that was coming through. I was a college teacher. I wasn't looking to be known for the psychic work at all. But in about 2008, my guide started lecturing through me, full lectures. And then Once I began recording them and transcribing them, they said, we have a book to write, and if you take 2 weeks, we'll do it. And that's the first of now 10 books. The 11th is almost completed. Resurrections is the 10th book that they've dictated through me. And all of the books are the unedited transcripts of the channeling sessions. There's no writing involved. I sit in a chair. They're all done now in front of audiences. In the old days, I used to be on the phone with somebody while the CD recorder was going, and then I would transcribe. Now it's just we send the videotape off to the transcription service, and they do it, and then somebody proofs it, and it's in the book. That's done.
Wow.
But that's what I do now, and that's my work. So I do work as a psychic. I call me a medium for the living, which means I can step into people that are alive and hear the people that they ask about, and often start to resemble them and get valuable information on the dynamics of a relationship. And when I'm channeling, I'm just listening to the guides. It's a different radio station. And then I'm just taking dictation. That's my job as a channel. I don't think it makes me more spiritually advanced than other people. I'm not a guru. I'm not a spiritual teacher. I don't want to be either of those things, but I'm very happy to show up for what I do. And maybe one day I'll actually understand it, because I don't always really. I mean, it's a little bit beyond me. And lately when I hear what they're teaching through me, I'm going, this is just too much. But they're wonderfully consistent in their teaching, and they're much wiser than I am. And I believe them. I know that it's true.
Well, you know, what comes to mind for me when I hear you talk about this, Paul, is, you know, I often say, you know, there's a lot of channeled information out there, supposed channel information, and the channels that I personally resonate with, of course, your material being one of them. It's like whether everything is sort of channeled, I believe, to some degree or another. You hear the great artists, you know, talk about this sort of thing, inspiration coming through them. And, you know, when someone claims that they're having the experience that you're having, and then you look at the actual material, it's like, okay, something's going on here, because in the cases, the ones I'm thinking of, it's so inspired. And so, I mean, writing 10 books, you know, I wrote my first book, 100 pages, 3 hours to listen to, and it was grueling and painstaking. You know, you're literally getting up and talking, and it's the whole book. And having read some of that material, it's like, wow, this is so inspired and so powerful. So to me, that is an indicator that something really interesting is indeed going on.
Well, there's an energy that comes through when I work, you know, and the guides work with energy, and they say that the books are energetic transmissions that work directly with the reader. So people read the books and they feel it, or they have experiences. They start opening up psychically, or, you know, seeing energy fields. It's really very, very common with this. When I was first doing this work, I wasn't doing it because of the information. I was wary of the information because I thought, who the hell am I? It's coming through me, But the energy was palpable. And I'd sit in this little circle for all those years, and the guides would say, we're putting a hand on everybody's forehead. The whole room would go like, boom, you can feel it, you know, and it's continued and amplified. So I've always trusted the energy. And when the text started coming through, it was in support of the energy. The guides say the real books are the energetic transmissions that work directly with the reader, and the books provide context. I don't think that anything that comes through me is terribly convenient. I think if I wanted to do some kind, I don't know, like my guides don't seem to care about popular culture, you know, they don't, it's just not about that for them. They don't play into the zeitgeist of fear and all that stuff. They're here, they got their thing, they do it consistently. It's quite possible, but I really, and this is what I've heard from people, I don't think that they've contradicted themselves yet in all of this material. So something's going on, that much I will say. And it's not that I'm a doubter. I think, because I'm not. And at the beginning, I was reserved, and I can still be a skeptic. You know, I think that there's a real difference between what's called channeling and what's inspired. And I think, I agree with you, great art is inspired. Great music is inspired. Great speech is inspired. Channeling really is taking dictation. The difference is you don't get to go back and craft it or fix it or take out the sentence that isn't appropriate for the time. That's not how it works. And I've heard of people that they go back, they edit their channeling, and I go, in my case, it's not mine to edit.
Sure.
My book's on my name appears on the book covers, but I'm not the author. I was a writer when I was younger, and I had the worst case of writer's block of anybody I've ever met. And the irony that these things just come out fully formed is
exact opposite.
well, it's a big pendulum swing. I agreed to write a memoir, tell my story about all this stuff, which means I'm going to have to actually sit down and write something again after many years. And I'm nervous because I do feel like I've got it easy. I just turn to the station, they're prepared, they deliver. And then I go back and I read it after the fact, maybe. Some of it I don't read after. I think I retain a third of everything they say. Because if just look in the books themselves, there's 11 of them. They average 300 pages a piece. One of them was 500 pages. I mean, it's like, thousands and thousands of pages of information, plus all of the other lecturing and teaching that they do through me, which is consistent. So there's a lot of material.
So can you speak to who they are, the collective? It sounds like a collective of...
It's a collective. They use, almost always, they use the we. We are here to discuss, once in a while, there's one guy that pipes through, likes to be I, which is surprising. That's in the newest book, and I was surprised by it. But it was such a wonderful teaching that, and they said it's in the book, so it's in the book. I don't get to decide. The name that they've offered when they say, if you wish to call us something, you may call us, they've said the name Melchizedek, and I've heard that for a long time. But they've also said, we are the true self, which is another word they use for the Christ or Christ consciousness. They use the terms ascended masters in the first book. We're teachers, ascended masters. I wasn't all that comfortable with that language because it carries some baggage, but that was my problem. And they don't use it much. I haven't heard it again, although they wouldn't deny it. The one guy that I've seen a few times in vision clairvoyantly and under hypnosis and, in meditations where he always looks the same. He's terrific. He wears this great big tall hat with this flat thing on top and looks almost like what a Russian Orthodox priest might wear. Big hat. And and the palest blue eyes, the most beautiful blue I've ever seen in my life.
Wow.
And with great depth and compassion in them. And and when I saw him, I recognized who that was. And when I channel, and I mean, this has been reported hundreds and hundreds of times at this point, my eyes often turn pale blue when I
wow.
Yeah, it's trippy because I have hazel eyes. And that's when the energy is really just flush. And, I'm in the energy to that extent. And the guides are working often with people individually, so they're right up close. So I'm comfortable with the they. The only reason they're called the guides, is because my ex 100 years ago, when he found out that I could do this stuff, he used to say, ask the guides this, ask the guides that. And they're called the guides because why not? And they don't seem to care.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm curious why the title Resurrection for this one.
Well, they're teaching what they call the monad or the divine principle. We can call it the Christ within. You can call it the seed of God. It doesn't really matter, I don't think, what you call it. But they're speaking about the rearticulation of what they call the monad in form and expression. And the resurrection, they say, is the divine within reclaiming itself through all aspects of our experience. And they say that is how a world is made new. It's made new at a different level of consciousness than we're currently holding in this collective. They say we're operating, they call it an octave. They say an octave is a series of high and low notes with other octaves, beyond it. And the octave that we know ourselves in, which is the common field or reality, holds a level of agreement to what they say is separation from our source. And so when we're lifted to what they call the upper room, which is, they say, the octave above the one that we've known ourselves in, our consciousness and our vibrational field is altered and is shifting in order to claim the new, or the inherent divine that has been denied through the lower octave, into manifestation. So the resurrection is the divine self in a realized state coming through all of us to claim a world operating beyond, I suppose you could say, beyond fear, or beyond what fear, which is separation, has rendered. They say, you've lived on a planet for so long with war that you expect war to be there, and it will always be there until you lift to a level of consciousness where war is not possible, cannot be chosen, and they're teaching us that level of expression.
Right. And so this upper room, do they speak to it as, hey, this is one octave up and there's many others, or?
Yeah, they do. But they say the upper room is the highest we can know while maintaining form. So it's the level that we can achieve while we still have a body, which is still somewhat tethered to the lower field. So they talk about the upper room in some ways as a doorway to what exists beyond. They talk about the kingdom, and they say the kingdom is the realization of the inherent divine in all manifestation, the source of all things. So you're walking out and you're saying, yeah, that's a tree, but it's also source and everything and nothing, all things, and because they say nothing can be excluded. And that's a place of consciousness that I haven't aligned to yet, but I've experienced the upper room, and it's kind of amazing. They lift people up there and they say, what is there to be afraid of here? And there's nothing, because they say fear doesn't exist there. And if you're not choosing in fear, you're not replicating it. They say that the action of fear is to claim more fear. And every choice we make in fear has gotten us more of the same. So you move to this level when fear really isn't on the menu, and you begin to choose differently, and that actually claims one's life, at least it has for me, in a radically different way than, at least in my case, what it used to be.
Yeah, for me, I can speak personally, and I just talked about this a few days ago on the podcast, learning how to process and deal with fear as it arises, I think is just such a huge part of the next step for all of us. And it sounds like you're really saying the same thing. This is like the barrier that, keeps us tethered, to lower level. So this is, 10th book, the beginning, book 1 of the manifestation trilogy. Obviously you hear a lot of talk about manifestation, and what do your guys say about manifestation?
Well, a whole lot. None of it's necessarily, I think, what people really want to hear. The first thing they say is that everything we see around us, we're in agreement to. Agreement being energetic accord or vibrational accord, co-resonance. That doesn't mean we made it so, but it does mean that we're aligned to it at the level of consciousness. So people say, I'm going to go manifest a better relationship, a bigger apartment. I mean, unfortunately, I think there's been this idea that the universe is just a catalog that we order from. The problem with that is, and I think in some ways everything can be chosen and experienced, but the challenge is, or the question becomes, who's creating, who's manifesting, and why? So the guides used to say, there's nothing wrong with the house on the hills. Somebody gets to live there, but why do you want it? And if you want it to be the envy of your neighbors, you're creating in fear. And so much of what we're aspiring to is what we've been taught to want, to look a certain way, to have a certain sum in a bank account, to be esteemed in a certain kind of way. And finally, these things are all transient. The guides say when you move to what they call the upper room, you're going into an agreement with Source, the source of all things. So you move into a place of receptivity. You're not busy sort of saying, I want this, and this, thank you very much. You're actually sort of moving to an agreement to what already is, which is divine. I'm going to call it divine flow. That's not their language. And I may not be saying this right, because I'm trying to remember how they spoke about it in the
Sure.
books. But the idea, this is how the guides put it. They say there is one note sung in the entire universe that is in manifestation as all things. You can call that source or God or whatever, consciousness, whatever you want to call it, but the one note sung. Sometimes they call it the word, as in the beginning was the word, the active
youniverse,
principle
the
of,
one
yes,
verse.
exactly, the active principle of the divine. Everything is that, operating at varying levels of tone and scale and vibration. So once you begin to comprehend that it's all source, you stop denying it and you become receptive to it. That's my understanding. I don't think it precludes having what you want, but I think perhaps what one wants is altered at this level of consciousness, because we're not seeking to prove ourselves or to get there first before somebody else does. And we're not operating, hopefully, I think if you're in the upper room, they would say you can't be. You really can't be. They say you can't be the light and hold another in darkness. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
So you can't misuse this because it's simply not possible to do so. You understand?
Yeah.
So my experience with this, such as it is, truthfully, I'm living a life that I did not expect I would ever live now, and wasn't planned by me, and is better than I could have imagined. And I'm not saying it's perfect, but I've been shown what happens when I stop demanding and I start receiving, which is a little bit different. And so, the guides have said, we're all so busy trying to get source or God or whatever to know us, to know, we're trying so hard to know God that we forget that God or whatever that is already knows us, knows
Right.
what's in our heart. And so this kind of manifestation is giving your heart's desire to source to allow it to be made.
Yeah. It's more of a knowing that there's more that is going to manifest. It's inevitable. And as opposed to trying to dictate all of that, allowing it to come.
Well, the guides talk about, they call it the small self, and that's not to denigrate, it's just the personality structure. And, they say the personality structure, I mean, it's kind of the mask we wear when we're, in this life. But they say the personality structure knows itself through history. It knows itself through past experience and conditioning and cultural agreements of an age or a time. What's appropriate now wasn't appropriate 100 years ago and 300 years ago and, whatever. So they say that the true self or the divine self expresses beyond time, the construct of time. And when we begin to operate at that level or with that in agreement, we stop seeking to replicate the known or what we've known because it's been there, because then we're just replicating history, which is what we do. We do this unintentionally, and we do this at the level of the individual and at the level of the collective. So the guides say every problem we really have or challenge that we face in this world, they call it, a result of the denial of the divine or source, where we've obscured or denied or blocked or refused to agree to the inherent holiness of all things. And they include the body. They say, we believe that if there is a God, it's something up on a cloud somewhere, and we're stuck in a body until we get rid of it. And they say, if you deny the divine in the body, you've also denied it in the ocean and in the sky and in the earth. You've denied the source and form. And source is form, just operating at different degrees of tone. This is how I understand the teaching.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. It's learning that, there are no moments more divine than any other moment that ever, this moment is as divine and holy as any other moment ever has been, could be, or will be, from my perspective. And that's one thing to say it, and it's another thing to feel it and move into it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's really where our work lies, in uncovering the divinity. And it's easy when it's beautiful and you're having
absolutely
a stellar banner day, and it's not as hard, Monday morning at the water cooler sometimes, right?
I agree entirely. The guides pretty much say the same thing, but they say all is holy or nothing is.
Mm.
And you don't get to cherry pick, and they say, it doesn't, it's not like a kitten with a pretty ribbon on it, it's all things and everything. And that doesn't mean, everything that we create in denial of the divine tends to cause us pain. And that's the violence we see and war and all these things. There are creations. But, if you go to the source that must express beyond what is seen, that's how they say the world is made new. They say you can't lift the evil man to the upper room because you've made him evil. You've aligned to him at that level of consciousness and vibration, and consequently you're stuck there with them. It's this idea of what you put in darkness calls you to the darkness. They say what you damn damns you back, what you bless blesses you in return. And it's important to understand that when they say what you bless, that doesn't mean you're condoning something. It means you're claiming the presence of the divine upon something that has been denied the divine, which they say actually alters form. That's how matter is changed.
Wow. By bringing, it's something that I've contemplated often, is this idea of, evil existing and evil in the world, and, bringing appreciation. It does, like you said, it doesn't mean I'm condoning, but seeing the bigger picture. And that's easier said than done, obviously, especially when it's directly harming, or, someone in your family has been hurt, is this evil thing. What do the guides speak in the new book, in detail about how to confront and deal with evil?
I don't know if they talk about confronting it. They talk about not battling it, because when you battle it, you're actually reinforcing it. You're aligning at that level. But they are saying they said something interesting, and I think it's in this book, or may have been in the one before it. When they would say things like, well, all things are of God. And the question was, well, what about fear? Was my question. Well, what about fear? And they said, well, fear is of God, but it just denies it. That's fear's action in some ways, is to deny source. And my understanding of evil is the intent to do harm. It has to do with intent. And I think we're accountable to all of our actions. They've said this again and again and again. Basically, if it's yours, if it's your action, you're accountable to the ramifications of it. They do talk about redemption. This is more in the book that they're writing now, and how that occurs in consciousness and through source. But confronting evil, they talk about transmuting it. They talk about reclaiming the inherent divine where it's been denied. And some of it's as simple as, I suppose you could say it. I'm going to say this wrong, and I don't want to, but you have to see the inherent divine that exists in the one who does the heinous act, but you're not confirming or agreeing to the heinous act. Because if you deny the God in that human being, my guides would say you've also denied it in yourself in that moment. You can't be the light and hold another in darkness. Now, the action of the light is the light itself. It's not what I think should happen at my level of fear or judgment, or my need for retribution, because I can fall into all those things, and they're basically traps. They say culturally, we used to like to hang the horse thief in the town square, and everybody would gather, and then they would feel that evil was vindicated, evil was banished from the town, and would go about their businesses. It's never worked. Ever. And
now you've got two horse thieves, right?
Pretty much. And now you've got, other ways that we find to do it. And that's never transformed anything. What transforms us, I think, is a shift of an awareness of who and what we are. And we can't make that shift if we're very busy seeking to make others wrong. And again, that's not to say that people aren't responsible for what they do, but I think there's a difference between finally the negation of source in any individual, and the realization that, they did a really awful thing, and they're responsible for the ramifications of the act.
It's almost like it's training, it's the job at hand. The task for us is to see through the heinous act, right? To pierce the veil, the illusion of the
Oh,
role
yeah.
that they're playing.
I agree with you. And I think some of it also has to do with how we operate through moral lens. I mean, if you look at history, this is an easier one. The victor writes the history book. The one who lost the battle doesn't have much of a say. So, what the guides have said recently, and I'm curious about this because they've actually been working very directly with the idea of the reclamation of memory and history in Source.
Hmm.
And which startled me when they started on this. And I'm like, what the hell are they talking about? But they say all of our understanding of our personal history or collective history is actually known through the lens of separation. So consequently, it's all wrong at a
Wow.
very fundamental level, because I'm saying there is no God as I look at all these things, and then consequently affirming them. So when they talk about reclaiming memory in history, it's not about pretending something didn't happen. I mean, my father was a Holocaust survivor. He got out when he was 13, was sent to London with a
Wow.
bunch of other Jewish kids after Kristallnacht. I mean, it's like, shitty, awful, horrible, horrible things happen in the world. And I think, the motives behind them, must be addressed. But they're all born in the denial of the divine, or the denial of the inherent sanctity of a human being, you know? So
Right.
the idea of reclaiming memory is another way of looking at this. We're already operating through this idea of perpetuating an identity of who and what we are that is born in separation. And we can continue to do this. Why my guides say they're teaching is because humanity's at a time of reckoning, and a reckoning is a facing of oneself and all of one's creation, and all of things that have been created in fear need to be reseen or reknown in a higher way. Because if we don't go about our business reclaiming our true nature, we're going to be in trouble. We've created the means to destroy everything under the pretext of being safe, which is really nuts if you
Yeah.
think about it.
Yeah.
But that's what we've done. And this idea, well, they did it and those awful people did it. What the guides say about manifestation is if you can see it, you're aligned to it, and the consciousness that you're bringing to it confirms it or can alter it. It's how you hold
Huge.
anything in consciousness. It is huge. It's the world.
Yeah.
So in Resurrection, they talk a lot about how a world is made new. In the newest book, they're doing that too. But they work with the claim, which is actually a New Testament claim, which is, behold, I make all things new. And they talk about the divine self, or the God within, being the one that does that, not the personality. Because the
Yeah.
personality still wants things to be the way, at least mine does, wants things to be the way I think that they should be, to make me
Sure.
happy and content and not be challenged by reality.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think that is such powerful, powerful truth. This, if you can see it, you're aligned to it. And it's like, it's this idea of there is no out there. It's like, it is in some way, shape, or form a reflection of you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny, I'm not a very good New Ager. I really never was, and when people would say, well, why did she create that? Why did he create his illness? I mean, I watched 2/3 of the people I knew died during the AIDS epidemic. The kids I went to college with, my
Wow.
teachers, it was like awful. Nobody, why did they create? I mean, I don't know. But I have to say, so I don't agree with that. But because I actually think, for example, if you live in a town where they're poisoning the water because the company's dumping pollutants in the water and the kids get sick, the kid didn't create it. But I do believe that we've claimed a reality where such things are possible and permissible. And there is collective agreement. So where I think perhaps some of what my guides teach may differ from others, and I don't know this because I don't read other people's channeled stuff, is that the idea that the collective is also actively creating through our expectations of what should be, and this can be cultural, or I think it can be the species itself. The guides have said that humanity is going to make it. They actually said that the species, who we are at a collective higher level, have decided to undergo a massive change in order to make it, because we can't go on as we have, denying the divine in your brother, your sister, those people over there on the other side of the border, whatever it is. You can't go on as you have if you wish to remain, because you're going to blow each other up.
Right.
So that's why.
Yeah. Have they given, provided much insight into what that looks like as, this massive change and the repercussions and how things shift?
Not a lot. I mean, some. It's addressed in Resurrection. They're talking about it more in the newest book because I keep asking because I get frustrated.
Yeah.
And they said you can't really imagine it because all you can imagine is improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And some of what's actually, they say, you can only build a house on an old foundation for so long that sometimes you have to build a new foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And the foundation they're saying can be claimed is at this other level of consciousness. You can call it Christ consciousness, the upper room. I think there's a word for it in any discipline or any way of looking at spirit. But that's where they say it occurs, and they say it's not what we think, but basically it's a world where we're not choosing and operating in fear.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. I'm going to ask them if they want to say anything about this. I've had a long
That'd
day.
be wonderful.
Come through. I'll see. When I do this, I whisper and repeat. I won't say one thing. We will only say one thing. What is occurring now? What is occurring now is actually preparation. Is actually preparation. What will come for what will come? What will come is of a magnitude. What will come is of a magnitude of change. You're not seeing this plane for a long time. That you have not seen on this plane for a long time. But the significance of this is that a new world is made. Is that a new world is made or rendered new by the consciousness of those who align to it, by the consciousness of those who align to it. We will not speak about heavens and hells. We will not speak about heavens and hells. We will speak about the earth you've known. We will speak about the earth you've known that is in most ways an outpicturing of the world that you expect, have demanded to learn through, and have chosen to live in, and have chosen to live in. What is occurring now? What is occurring now is the preparation for a new world, or a new way of being in a world, or a new way of being in a world that will claim all things new, What does this appear as? What does this appear as is better than what it looks like, is better than what does this look like? Your reliance upon the old and the senses of the old. Your reliance upon the old and the senses of the old will also be changing. What the world is now. What the world is now is in dense form. When things are lifted to the higher octave, they may resemble what they were. They may be altered to live. They may be altered to live at a level of tone, that holds no fear, Institutions that hold a basis in control or fear will be restructured. How you understand education, medicine, how you understand education and medicine. Law itself will be restructured to benefit and to claim the truth of being the truth of being. So much of what you see is actually born in agreement, with the denial of God, to the denial of God. We are not speaking of religion. Certainly not a religious state, or an ideological country, or world. We are speaking of the source of all things. Come as each of you, singing a new world into being, through your own consciousness, presence in being. It will be done. It is so. It will be done. It is so. And you are party to this if you wish. Period. And they're saying period.
Wow. Alrighty then. Oh, wow. And, obviously it's Paul back with us now after that incredible bit of information from the guides. Have you ever sort of drilled on time frames and, any of that sort of stuff with them?
A little. I mean, not a lot. They give it. I don't ask for it. I almost don't want to know, truthfully. Yeah. But what they've said, and it pissed people off when they said it, is 4 generations.
Gotcha.
before this begins to be made manifest, and that the preparation is now. And I just heard it and I repeated it, and it's funny because a couple of people have mentioned this when I mentioned it recently. Somebody said, another interviewer said, "Oh yeah, that's how long it took Moses to get the Jews across the desert." And the reason was so that they forgot that they were slaves. It was so that a new level of consciousness could be born. I don't know if that's true because I wasn't raised with it, but I don't know. But that's what they've said for generations, and they've said that those who are being born are actually they're prepared for this. They're up to the task of this. Those of us who are here now, and they said this in the very first book, which was called I Am the Word, which was channeled in 2009. They said, you are the first in a generation, that is preparing for this.
Wow.
And so, I know people want it now, and, I don't, but it is happening. But it's, some of this is the seeding of the higher consciousness. They use the metaphor at times of a field being tilled and then seeded in a higher way. And what is born there, what grows there, what blooms there is born in a different way than could have been through the old ideology, old structural consciousness.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, I'm curious if they've spoken to, certainly in the, mainstream media, interesting with governments, they have really started talking a lot about, extraterrestrial life, alien life. A lot of times with, other channels, there's some of that comes, either they're channeling someone who's a non-physical entity or extraterrestrial, what have you. So I'm curious if your guides have ever spoke to any of that, other civilizations and
no, not only to acknowledge it. It's not their teaching. I mean, they're teaching a kind of mysticism, I think. The very first book signing I did, which was at the old Bodhi tree in Los Angeles, years ago. Maybe 4 people showed up, and one of them raised their hands after I read a little section from the book, and she said, "Oh, this sounds like what the Intergalactic Council is saying. And what do your guides say about the evil aliens?"
Yeah.
And I wasn't planning on channeling, and the guides piped in and they said, "Isn't it bad that you have to vilify everyone here? Now you're going to go about doing this in other universes."
Right.
You're bringing the same paradigm of separation and duality to this stuff. So deal with it here. So, I mean, they certainly haven't denied other life, and I wouldn't either. It's not part of the truth, but it's not the subject of their work. Maybe one day they'll take it on.
Yeah, it makes sense. You said this book, this new one, there were some things that were sort of shocking to you, surprising to you. Could you speak to that?
I don't remember what they were. I said in the interview questions, I don't remember what they were. What was shocking in the book? Oh, yeah, I do. Well, I think I said something about this. Yeah, I mean, when they talk about manifestation and form, I get thrown by it. They're talking about moving to a level of consciousness where matter becomes more elastic or malleable to thought, because we're not operating at the level of density that we're used to. In other words, things happen much more quickly, is how I see this. And I get challenged by that. I get challenged when they speak about things like the basis of world religions. I just like anything that's got science or history attached. I don't want to go there. But I flunk science. I got a C, I think, in earth science. I'm not the guy. And the guides, it's very funny. They don't talk about, I think they've used the word dimensions maybe 3 times. And I think they've done that to answer somebody's question who was asking about it. They speak about octaves instead, and all their terminology is musical, and which I'm a little more comfortable with.
Yeah.
So what makes me uncomfortable about the teaching, I'll tell you what makes me uncomfortable, is how resolute they are. Yeah. That this is occurring now and in and through us. And I mean, they say to me at times, you're farther along than you think. I used
Yeah.
to say, I'm not the best student of the work. I'm a good student of the work. I'm at times somewhat baffled as to how this happened because I wasn't looking for it. I didn't, when somebody says, "Oh, I want to be a channel," I go, "Why would you want to do that?"
Yeah. I've always
It's
thought the same thing.
it's stenography. Channeling is stenography,
Yeah. Right.
Being inspired is different. When I read psychically, I'm inspired. I'm getting information, but I have to interpret it. But
Hmm.
I'm still, and I didn't think of myself as psychic until I started doing the work with
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
and it was like, oh, brother, this is real.
Yeah.
So that's just me, though. It's not other people. And I'm grateful that the people that seem to be attracted to the work that comes through the guides are smart people. They're not looking to be told what to do. And my guides don't tell people what to do. They
Yeah.
really don't. They really honor free will. Um, so it's not convenient. It's not feel good stuff. Sometimes I wish it were. I could be on a cruise ship doing this, but that's not what's
Here.
going to happen with me.
Right.
I live in the rainforest now. I'm very happy here in my little place in the middle of nowhere.
Well, I think who you are as the channel really brings some validity to it. It's obvious just connecting with you for 60 seconds. This is not someone who's got a lot of pomp and circumstance and pretense. And, he thought about playing the part of the guru, or there's none of that energy. And I think that's probably has something to do with why you've been chosen.
I don't know if it's chosen. I don't know how it worked.
Yeah.
I think I asked for without knowing what I was asking for. When I was maybe 30, 31, and I was studying with this woman who taught healing, who's no longer with us. And she said in one class, everybody write down a prayer. I write down a request. You're going to get it. Write it down carefully. And she gave us this little prayer to work with this caveat, like, be careful how you state it. And I was at this place at that age of real devotion, I think. I just had been given enough evidence that there was something more, and it made everything else pale in comparison. And I don't remember what I wrote down. I wish I'd had that piece of paper somewhere, but basically, I think I asked to go all the way with whatever this was. And I wonder sometimes if the books aren't a way there for those who want it. They've said that my job was to hold the doorway, which pissed me off. That was a while ago. But then they invited me across the threshold with everybody else at a certain point, and that was a big deal. And that's when my life really began to open in wonderful ways. So I don't know if chosen or agreed to or past life work that prepare. I don't really know. I don't even know that it matters. There's the glamour that people attach to this stuff is counterproductive.
Agreed.
Doesn't get anybody anywhere.
Agreed. I definitely appreciate that sentiment. Have they ever spoken to, I remember years back, and I can't remember exactly, I believe it was Osho, where I first heard the idea of source emerging from the void. Like, it's everything and nothing simultaneously. And that's something that's a little intimidating and just a lot to even wrap our minds around. So I'm curious if they've spoken to this, this idea of a void.
They've said things like God is all things and no thing, and maybe it's the same idea.
Yeah.
I don't know if they elaborated on it. I think it may be in Resurrection that they spoke about that. I don't think it's the current book. Maybe it is. We can't hold God as an idea. All the best we can do is have an idea. It's too vast.
Yeah. Right.
But when they talk about this, they actually talk about it in helpful ways, because otherwise, why bother? They said, you're never going to know the whole ocean, but if you swim in the ocean, you will know the ocean, as it can be known. But it's the experience of it. And I have to say, if it's not experiential, I think it just is a bunch of ideas, and I'm aware where I've had experience and where I don't integrate those experiences, and where I may be refusing experience. And I also know when I'm a student and I'm trying to figure it out, when
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that. But I think the metaphor of allowing yourself to be in the ocean to have that experience probably is the same thing as allowing source to be source and allowing yourself to be in it and of it and with it. And that requires that we believe that we're worthy of this. And the guides say it's already here. We're the only ones denying it. It's not like you're creating God. They
Yeah.
say you're not creating it, you're just not denying it, and not God as a religious structure. It's just the word they use to mean all things of one source.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do readers need to? I'm sure there will be people that listen and have their first exposure to you, and probably already some going and getting books online. There's a lot of content there. Do they need to start at the beginning with your first book? Can they begin with Resurrection or one of the others, or
Resurrection's oddly an interesting entry point. It actually speaks to everything.
Mm-hmm.
I think people benefit from going to the first book and going through them, but I've also discovered that people go where they're led.
Yeah.
And if people go to Resurrection and it speaks to them, more than likely they're going to go back and look at some of the others as well. People tend to go to the book that's the right book. That's what I'm saying.
Yep.
Let me ask the guides, go to Resurrection. They're saying go to Resurrection if you wish, but you will have some catching up to do. Your energy field will be assaulted. Will be assaulted in some ways by the magnitude of the vibration when you start with the smaller books. When you start with the smaller books, you lift an increment to be able to stand the change, to be able to withstand the change. You are protected through the process. You are protected through the process. You cannot be harmed by any text. You cannot be harmed by any text below the level of this text. But the level of amplitude in this text is quite a bit for the new beginner. For the new beginner, you will be met by us. You will be met by us at the level that you can hold, and not beyond that, and not beyond that. In other words, you can't drink more. In other words, you can drink more than you can hold.
Yeah. Perfect. Love that. One of the things I have heard, and it makes sense with really what they just shared with us, is it's an energetic transmission, and obviously with varying degrees of intensity. These different books, like they just alluded to, you've had people report experiencing phenomenon around your books. Could you share a little bit about that?
It's happened since the very first book. The reviews of the first book started coming out. Nobody knew who I was. I didn't do any interviews for that. I mean, I was an NYU teacher who had a channel book that he was hoping wouldn't get him fired. And the first reviews started coming out on Amazon, and people started saying things. I'm reading this book and my body is vibrating. I'm reading this book and I'm seeing auras, and that's happened throughout all the books. So the phenomena, really, the books work with the reader. The guides actually say they sponsor the readers, at the level that they can be taught. My guides, I don't think, are the guides that write the books. They're not, I think, our personal guides. They're not going to tell you how to get a better job, but they're there to support the learning of the books. And it's often quite physical. I mean, I can't tell you how many people said that they were listening to the audiobook on their way to the work and they had to pull over because it was just too much.
Yeah.
The energy was too strong for them. So, and wonderful things have happened to people while they're reading the books. I mean, there was a woman, and I only know this because she wrote it. I don't think she was somebody that I knew, but she woke up. She'd fallen asleep with the audiobook on, and she was undergoing cancer treatment. And when she woke up, there was a section on healing, and she felt all the energy going to the affected part of her body,
Wow.
So things occur, but that's the guides. It's not me. And I think it's who people are and what they're able to hold. Somebody like me, who was raised sort of an atheist, I needed something to give me something tangible to trust. And that was important. And I like the books because they often offer the same experience to whoever's reading them.
Yeah. It leads me to the question, I always ask, sort of as we're getting down to the end of the interview, a story of synchronicity, serendipity, positive paranormal story, anything like that. And so I'm curious if you have any story to share with your own experience, related to the guides or otherwise.
I'll do otherwise only because it's funny. I don't know. I wound up on Maui for some reason. I'd been to Hawaii once. I said I would never come back. I came on a bad blind date years ago. I said, never going to that state again. And now I live here. But I ended up here because I couldn't go back to my apartment in New York when New York shut down because of COVID in 2020. I was in Costa Rica, and somebody said, why don't you come here, and found me a place to live. About a year before that, I was at the Esalen Institute teaching, and I was getting some body work, and I was floating away, and I saw this giant monkey floating over my head. And I said to the practitioner, I'm seeing a giant monkey. And they said, oh, that's funny. I was chanting to Hanuman right before I came. That's why I was late. And I thought, well, that's it. I didn't even know who Hanuman was.
Right.
Well, I live on Maui down the road from, the Ram Dass satsang.
Yeah.
That's become my community, and I find the whole thing, the synchronicity around the whole thing is too nutty for me, and I'm just very happy that I found lovely people in a lovely place, none of which I was expecting. But when I look at and actually I only met those folks because somebody booked a reading with me online when I was first on Maui, and I had bad internet, and I said, I'm really sorry for the bad internet, I'm on Maui. And the guy said, well, I'm on Maui too. And it turned out he was one of Ram Dass's caregivers. And that was just on and on and on and on and on and on. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. But it's funny. So that's my synchronicity for the moment. And it just sort of, I don't know. I like the old thing they say in 12-step land, coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. So I'll leave it there.
I like that. I'm curious about your own readings or intuitive psychic ability. Is that something that is ever present for you, or is it sort of like you turn on off? I
mean, it's available, but I don't do it when I'm not intending to. I never check in on my friends. I don't, read. If I'm dating somebody, I would never think to turn in to see how it was going. Because if I'm reading for myself, I'm gonna, I have my ego gets involved, outcome.
Sure.
But when I'm reading for other people, I'm pretty good. I'm very good, I think. But I'm just, because I can be neutral or impartial to the information. But that's, it's always there, but it's kind of, I've got to turn up the volume, just like I can channel, the guides are there when I'm there to do it. But I'm not always channeling like that. Yeah. It's a radio station. It's available.
Right. Fascinating stuff, Paul. This has been an incredible drop-in with you, and I know the listeners will, like I said, those that aren't familiar many will want to become more familiar. What's the best place to get, connect with you, get the books? Amazon, your website?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble has them all. On my website, I do a lot of online stuff. I teach an intensive online every month. I'm doing public workshops again, and I do a Wednesday evening channeling as well. All that's on my website, which is just my name. It's paulselig.com. And I'm easy to find.
I do have one final question for you here, and I'm probably asked it before. I don't recall. I typically do. It's my cliche closer.
Sure.
And in 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Paul Selig?
Hope. I want to say hope. Right now, that's just Paul right now saying that. I don't know what I would. That's not the guide. And for me, I think my life is hopeful. And I wasn't always in a hopeful place, I have to say. And now that I've gotten some distance from it, I go, wow, that was hard, And just being alive was hard. I mean, that's all. And so it's very different now, I have to say. And I do have to sort of thank the guides in the work for probably more of that than I normally would. But what's life about? I think it's about the opportunity to learn and be who we truly are. I do think that this is school, but that's my sense.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of truth in that, and all that you share. Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom and all that you do in the world. And all of you out there for tuning your beautiful brainwaves and incredible hearts into another episode. Until next time, journey well.
Thanks for having me.
Also, before we sign off, I wanted to remind you to download the Golden Key audio or ebook as my free gift to you at goldenkey.gift using the Golden Key code POSITIVEHEAD. And please, if you enjoy my gift, leave a positive review on Amazon so others can find the book and unlock their lives with the help of the Golden Key as well.